Welcome, 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 one and all. It looks like we are back in the season of giving because Papa Amazon themselves have collaborated with GameStar to bestow upon us even more gameplay footage for Amazon's very own New World MMO. Now earlier today, GameStar uploaded a video interview with the Miss Leia Jankowski, who seems to represent the infamous article site main-mmo.de. which if you don't recognize is in fact the specific article that did dive into some of the Twitch integration, the HORDE mode, and the streamer army features of New World. Now during this interview they showed off some brand new footage that is a continuation of the 10 seconds of Siege gameplay that Amazon Game Studios showed us during the last dev diary. But fear not people, it looks like they have not forsaken us for the entire month after all. Now I will say though that the gameplay does not include audio as the interview is still going on in the background and it's only about 2 minutes of footage that I was able to carve out of this video, but it's 110% better than nothing. This gives us a clearer picture of how the combat system and the siege system is going to work in game. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I made sure to slow it down so we could savor all the juicy details on this one. It starts off with the Spanish Inquisitor version of Thor, showing us how it feels to put the smackdown on a group of people with the magically imbued Warhammer. Now right away, we've already got a pause. Starting off at the bottom right, it does look like they do in fact have skills and abilities that we are able to use for our own weapons. That leads me to believe that there might be some sort of skill tree that we could level up and choose these different abilities with. And this feature does get touched on more in the most recent MMORPG article that also came out this morning regarding New World, stating that apparently, in terms of weapons like the one-handed axe, you could either decide to specialize in the melee-based tree, or you could use it as a throwing weapon and choose the range-based one instead. This is a great concept that I really hope is expanded upon because it'll allow us as the players to come up with all sorts of new and unique builds. Adding on to that, in the bottom we can also see that apparently their player level is around level 50, and I could only surmise that the glow means that they might have some points to spend on something. It also looks like that Warhammer in question is a tier 5 weapon from what I'm seeing by that Roman numeral icon there, which does mean that the tier system of the alpha will be making a comeback. But like we talked about in the previous territory video, we'll more than likely have to start off with lower level benches and then get them upgraded through town projects that the whole settlement can contribute to. And at the same time, we'll have to work our way crafting through the tiers to get to this point of endgame. We also see a couple of empty slots which seem like they could be used for either consumables or maybe even secondary skills of some kind. I'm really hoping that we do get access to food and drink that can buff our characters, because both in player versus environment and player versus player content, that would add a feeling of preparation that may enhance the experience overall. We also see in the top right what's known as battle tokens, which we did talk about a little while back when we found out information about siege warfare during the PvP blog, specifically saying that during siege battles, both sides will be able to earn points to spend both on upgrading and gear. For defenders, it could be something like consumables or upgraded wall defenses, and for the attackers it could be something like siege engines and towers. This seems to be further supported by the siege parts tooltip that we see right below that. And luckily, even though it's expected for most games to have this, on the left side we can see that there is in fact a working party system, which hopefully means that when it comes to grinding in PvE, that we'll be able to group up with our friends and guildmates to maximize efficiency. To continue on this, in this small interaction we can see the players fighting on what looks to be a capturable point. For those of you who speculated that the siege system would be capture point based, it looks like that will end up being a big part of it. We then see several people attempting to rush through the gates when someone activates what appears to be a magical war shout. At first I thought it was someone that was casting magic on them until the animation ended, but there's all sorts of chaos going on right here. We also get to see a little bit of the one-handed sword action from this player, while they have shockwaves from the Warhammer and the arrow and musket fire going on all around them. And apparently the person who did that war shout appears to be holding a one-handed axe like we talked about. One thing I wanted to bring up is that this fire that we're seeing is kind of difficult to pinpoint as being magic based. We already know that there are fire staves in the game, but for some reason I feel like this might be coming from a siege engine. And since the direction of it appears to be coming from up on top of the gate, without being able to see it, I can only guess that the engine dropping the fire is a boiling oil pot mixed with some lovely cinder to add a toast effect to their enemies. By the way, I'm still loving the look of these magically imbued weapons. I cannot wait until we can all together experience the crafting system of this game along with the combat. Now this next part is completely fresh and one that I was super excited to see. The reason for this is because I don't know if you folks know this about me, but I'm a big spear guy. When a game gives you the opportunity to pick up a one-handed or two-handed spear, the role-playing Spartan within me just immediately gets awakened. And one part that I'm glad to see here is right off the bat when this character Leonidas tosses their spear and it appears right back on the character model. The reason for this is because it would have been so annoying to have to go to retrieve our spears and pikes each time we throw them. Sometimes it's very likely for someone like me to miss too, so I'd rather not be climbing a tree after every fight just to try and retrieve my weapon. Now if you notice on the bottom right when they did this, it looks like it triggered a cooldown, which means that we'll probably have access to spear skills as well. There's also another one that has a cooldown on the far right, except these skills don't seem to have icons currently. I can only assume that these are placeholders right now and that they are working on the finishing touches for all the weapons, but I'm super glad that we'll have access to this specific tool when this game releases. And a nifty thing to look at too is when they seamlessly proceeded to switch weapons, their skill bar changed completely, but the cooldowns remain the same, which means that in both PvE and PvP, it's going to be very important to manage your cooldowns wisely, and even more important to make sure that the weapons you choose are going to be a good combination for your playstyle. The last thing you want is wasting a cooldown on a skill that missed entirely, or you didn't even really need. We also then see their sword mastery skill increase right after they go to town on this ancient guardian, and the area they appear to be in does in fact look like it's a temple of the ancients. I'm going to be very interested to see what type of bosses or types of monsters that they have to throw at us from the opposing factions. And also it does look like we were correct earlier. These extra slots on the bottom right seem to be solely tied to consumables. The very last piece of footage we get relates to some of the high level content, which is a fantastic thing to see this early on. Now of course we already know what the icons on the bottom right are, and it looks like this is in fact confirmation that the one-handed axe can be both used as a throwing weapon and melee. But one thing I'd like to draw your attention to is one, it does look like we will be getting access to different types of potions there, as well as still being able to place our campfires out in the wilderness, most likely to be used as the respawn. But two, notice that this axe is in fact a tier 5 weapon, but if you compare the difference between the great hammer that we saw earlier and this one, it appears that we have a blue graded weapon on our hands. Now this can only mean that the game will have different types of rarities throughout the tiers, and if we start off crafting 1 or 2 weapons, even if we get to 3, we might still be able to craft different grades of 1 and 2 weapons. Things like green grade, blue grade, maybe even all the way up to purple. And if Amazon is open to suggestions about this, if they ever do implement instance dungeons and raids or just more player versus environment content in general, one thing I'd really love to see of course is achievements, but also gear that looks noticeably different depending on what rarity it is. So if you were to earn an in-game piece of gear from a high level dungeon that ended up being a rare or legendary grade, it should look visually better than something you would get in a normal dungeon. It would also be pretty cool to see different types of difficulties for content, stuff that players that fit into the casual category can enjoy, and players that prefer a more hardcore experience, with gear and achievements that match the both of those. I'm also still going to advocate for honor point vendors that players that want PvP can enjoy. I would love to see PvP gear that looks visually different than its player versus environment counterpart, but that's only food for thought. Just like how I am now even more interested to learn about the opposing factions, like this Angry Earth Dryad Prowler that we see fighting in this clip. The scenery of this area looks incredible, and I am glad to see that the level cap is not 50, but in fact level 60. That'll be a good place for the game to start with. It also looks like blocking does consume your stamina, and it looks like dodging does do the same. One thing that was really cool to see as well is that the mobs themselves actually have skills of their own. I just hope that means that we're going to get a good challenge when it comes to the player versus environment aspect. That always feels like one of the important parts of having good environmental content in almost any game. And to add on to this last one, we also get a quick show of all the carnage that we'll be getting in these 50v50 battles, which does look really good from where I'm sitting right now. Compared to all the sandbox experiences we've gotten over the years, I would love to see something like this, but on a massive scale. This is truly starting to feel like a game that has a really good baseline and a lot of potential, as long as they take care of it and do it the right way. And after seeing this beautiful but brief showcase of the musket and watching these people go to town on this gate, I am incredibly indecisive now on if I'll be going for a melee weapon or a ranged. And to add on to that, how about you guys let me know in the comments below. From what you've seen, what weapon do you think you would most enjoy or would fit your playstyle? Any and all reasoning for that, I would absolutely love to read through them. And with that folks, that is all the gameplay footage that we have to go over currently, but I'm sure there will be more to come, so be sure to stay tuned. And as always, thank you all very much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful night or day, and farewell.